Hello and welcome to this Skill Me Up Academy webinar on Microsoft 365 certification updates. My name is Dwayne Natwick. I am an Azure MVP, a Microsoft certified trainer, and a regional lead. I hold multiple Microsoft 365 and Azure and security compliance and identity certifications from Microsoft. And you can reach me on the social media links provided on this slide. So, quick rundown of Skill Me Up Academy and what Skill Me Up Academy is. Skill Me Up Academy is the training arm of Opsgility. Opsgility is a Microsoft partner with multiple Microsoft competencies, and they also provide consultancy to organizations. Host virtual events on their one venue platform, as well as as a Microsoft Learning partner, do training and enablement with instructor-led training, as well as webinars and other virtual events for you to learn more about Microsoft 365, Azure, Dynamics 365, as well as Power Platform. And with that being said, let's talk about what this webinar is about. As a Microsoft 365, when you're looking to get certified and be a Microsoft 365 certified practitioner, there are multiple paths that you can take, and we're going to talk about some of the updates and new arrivals that have come about within Microsoft 365. We're going to talk about where you can find information about the latest certifications, what those updates and new arrivals are, and I've broken it out into 5 specific areas to discuss: the Exchange path, Microsoft Teams, which has begun to grow quite a bit, developer and security, with security being another growth area within the Microsoft certification program. And then we're going to wrap up with some updates and changes around the modern desktop certifications, as well as the administrator expert, and then talk about next steps and how you can take that take your journey to cloud services and Microsoft 365 further. So, what is new for Microsoft 365 certifications, and where do we find the latest certifications? Microsoft has what they call a certification poster that really outlines all of the certifications and what's in them, and they have it structured in each of the main functional areas. They have Azure and all the Azure certifications. They have Microsoft 365. They have Dynamics 365, and they have Power Platform. And then they underpin that with the security, compliance, and identity certifications, which kind of go broadly across a lot of those. And you can see on this MS 500 tile here for Security Administrator Associate, there's actually a double color code on there. You can see the little bar above the MS 500. One is navy blue, which matches the Microsoft 365 color code, and the other is green, which shows that it goes into also the security, compliance, and identity track. So I will try and share during the webinar in the chat the poster URL. But if you're just looking for it in general, you can go to your browser and type in Microsoft Certification Poster, and this poster will come up. And it's very easy. It's updated. The link stays the same, and as new certifications get added, they go right in there, and you can find out what the certification name is, as well as the exam code or codes. As you can see with a couple of these, they have 2 exams that make up that certification, and you can determine your route accordingly from that. And here's the link to that certification poster. Didn't realize there was some changes in the slide, but here's the slide poster, and you can go to that. And like I said, you go to Microsoft certification poster, you will get this URL and can very easily go to it. Microsoft Learn is also another helpful location and topic for learning, and this is where you can get to the certification poster as well as the information around the objective topics and the weighted percentages, the what you need to study and what you need to know, as well as Microsoft Learn content. We'll talk about that in terms of the next steps at the end of this presentation. So let's get into some of these certification updates. We're going to start with just specifically around Microsoft 365 fundamentals, and something Microsoft is doing in the spring here is they're making adjustments to all of their fundamentals courses. You're especially going to see probably some big changes to Microsoft 365 fundamentals and Azure fundamentals going forward. Because what they've decided around the fundamentals exams is they need to have it in a time box where instructor-led training can be delivered in a day-long course. Microsoft 365 fundamentals and Azure fundamentals has been customarily very long, and to deliver it in one single day has been very difficult. And a lot of learning partners, Opsagility being one of those, has delivered it in 2 days instead of one, for the ability to provide some walkthrough labs and exercises to get some hands-on. Microsoft is going across the board for all of their fundamentals courses to be a 6-hour course, which then gives you time for breaks and everything like that. It's 6 hours worth of content. So some things have been changed. And I believe that Microsoft 365 was previously 6 objective area topics, and if you look at the 4 bullets here at the bottom, those are the objective area topics now, and there are 4 of those. And what they've done with both, I think, Microsoft 365 fundamentals and Azure fundamentals is, as they've developed additional fundamentals courses around, especially with Microsoft 365 with Power Platform and Azure with security, compliance, and identity and data and AI, those have their own fundamentals courses. So I think they've pulled some of that information, the deeper learning information around that, out of there. The key thing around fundamentals courses, though, is these are all really describing and explaining. It's really high level. It's not any implement, design, and do kind of topics. So it can be taught in one day's time and gives you an idea across a wide breadth of areas of what services and concepts are around Microsoft 365 and what Microsoft 365 has for security, compliance, identity, and trust, and all of those things. The one thing Microsoft 365 fundamentals and Azure fundamentals both have is they have this 10 to 15% weighted objective domain around core concepts too. So if you're new to the cloud, I always recommend starting with Microsoft 365 fundamentals or Azure fundamentals, because you also get that foundational cloud concepts. The other fundamentals exams jump right into security, jump right into AI and machine learning, jump right into data, jump right into Power Platform, believing that you've already gone through either Microsoft 365 fundamentals or Azure fundamentals to get those core concepts. Some of the things that have changed is a little bit more around hybrid scenarios. Viva Insights is a fairly new service that they're putting a little bit more depth around. Microsoft 365 Defender has gone through some changes since fall of 2021's Ignite, so that has been adjusted. And really the key focus here is on Microsoft 365, Office 365, and Windows 365. So as I said, they're trying to pull some of where they've built fundamentals exams for specific service areas. They have decreased the topics within Microsoft 365 fundamentals and Azure fundamentals, where before it was very deep because it had to go through everything, because those were the only fundamentals classes. They had Azure, they had Microsoft 365, and they had Dynamics 365. Then they started adding like Power Platform and data and AI and security, compliance, and identity. And so it's given Microsoft an opportunity to scale down these courses and these exams a little bit to hit that 6-hour instructor-led training time box. So let's get into some specific tracks that might be of interest to you. And we're going to start with Microsoft 365 messaging certification. And Microsoft messaging certification, there's a couple of exams. There are a couple legacy exams that were retired. I believe one of those was, I think, like a 200 exam. They have now the 203 exam, which is the Messaging Administrator Associate. You take the MS 203 exam, you would get this certification. It was updated back in the late fall, and really focuses on managing and planning and managing your Exchange architecture, and this is focused a lot on Microsoft 365 messaging, which is Exchange Online, but I believe there is some planning and implementing hybrid configurations as well when you have an Exchange server still on site. So this has some legacy, Windows Server, Windows Exchange Server type content to it, and if you're an Exchange administrator, this is definitely an exam for you. New this month, April 20, or actually last month, based on we're hitting the beginning of May, but in April 2022 we had a beta exam released for the Exchange Online Support Engineer specialty. This is brand new. This is how to support customers. And obviously, if you are in an organization using Microsoft 365, you're probably using Exchange pretty heavily. Exchange Online is probably a very heavily used source of communication, just as Teams, probably Microsoft Teams would be. So they're growing more of the support engineer type certifications, and they are doing this. We'll hit the Teams one here in a moment, and they've done this as well on the Azure side to build more of the support engineer focus, as well as just the design and implement and administer that has been customarily part of the Microsoft certification tracks. Now we're getting more into how we're going to support. And this, taking the MS 2020 exam is going to get you a specialty within the Microsoft 365 certifications. It's not an associate or an expert level exam, it's a specialty exam. And you can see here there are 5 objective areas. Something I didn't point out in the previous slides around what objective areas are. When you see these objective areas and these percentage of weightings, you can get an idea of what areas are going to be important. And you need to get a weighted score of 700 or better out of 1,000. That's not to say there's 700 questions on the exam or 1,000 questions on the exam. There's generally, for any of the exams, you can expect between probably 40 and 60 questions of varying types, of multiple choice, of select the drop down, some case studies in some exams that'll help you choose the service areas and solutions that you need. But this will give you an idea of how those objective topics are dispersed and help you study. This one's pretty evenly dispersed, as you can see, with really hybrid being probably a little bit less focused on, because this is Exchange Online, so they're assuming in most cases that this is focused on somebody that has migrated fully to Exchange Online and isn't using an on-premises Exchange server anymore. But there are still obviously a lot of Exchange servers out there, and we need to understand how to support those. So therefore, there is a topic area around that. And that gets us through the messaging certs. And let's now get into the Microsoft 365 Teams certification updates. And this is one that's really growing quite a bit right now in the Microsoft 365 area. Obviously, with the work from home being a very important part of our lives today, Microsoft Teams has really exploded over the past couple of years, and Microsoft has recognized the need for expanding the understanding around Microsoft Teams, and so they have really done some things to update the current exams, as well as add quite a depth of exams within the Teams certification paths. So first and foremost is the original exam, the Teams Administrator Associate exam, the MS 700. You take the MS 700 exam, you get the Microsoft 365 Certified Teams Administrator Associate exam. This was updated with some minor updates. No major topics or content changes to this. It's still generally the same. This one's been out for a couple years now, so it was due for for a relook and an update. And so, really, you can see on the right side the bullets of what topic areas, and you can see really heavy on planning and managing Microsoft Teams. So, if you're an administrator, you've got to get Teams deployed within your organization and configured properly with proper security and governance and guest use policies and things like that. And then also how we're going to manage the chat, Teams, channels, and apps. What we're going to allow our users to create and add, what we're going to allow guests to create and add, what guests can be added to our environment, how we're going to do that. And then managing meetings and live events and monitoring and troubleshooting those Teams environments. You can see those two objective areas are a little bit lower on the percentages, and there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that in the next couple of slides. And you can see there is a path to an expert now within Teams Administrator, and we'll get to that on the next slide. So as you saw on that slide, you get the MS 700, which is the Teams Administrator Associate, and then there is a MS 720 exam. And again, that one's gone through a little bit of updating, or will have an update in May of 2022. It's actually fairly new. I think it went GA in the fall, maybe the summer. So it was going through beta, around the second half of 2021. So you pass the MS 720 exam. Along with the MS 700 exam, you then get that Teams Voice Engineer Expert badge. So if you are managing Teams and you are managing and you have an environment that has gone fully SIP or fully IP based communication, utilizing Teams or integrating some level of devices into your Teams experience across your organization, this exam, you should definitely look into this exam and being able to manage that Teams environment. If you're just using Teams for conference, for video conference calling and chat and collaboration, this might not be the one for you if your organization isn't using Teams Voice and this is really not using Teams Voice from a meeting standpoint where you're setting up a voice call. This is where you're really replacing your phones on your desk and using the PBX type features and phone type features around Teams, and giving everybody in your organization a phone number within Teams that people can call you on. That's really what this exam focuses on, and really focuses on how you're going to engineer that, how you're going to build the gateways and the networking and the quality of service that you're going to need for that. And you can see there's quite a few objective areas on this, spread fairly evenly with 6 objective areas, but the highest is the plan and configure. And I focus on this and talk about this anytime I'm talking about any associate or expert level exam. Any start to deployment within your organization starts with planning and having a defined strategy, a defined end goal in place. And that's really, why the plan and configure is so highly weighted in terms of this exam, is exactly that. And so again, if you're fully bought in and utilizing Microsoft Teams for your chat, your collaboration, your video calling, as well as your telephony within your organization, having these 2 exams and having this expert badge is going to be very important in terms of learning and understanding everything that can be done with Microsoft Teams. The last one within Microsoft Teams is one that also went into general availability in October 2021. And as I stated, Microsoft has really started over the last 12 months building in these troubleshooting and support level specialties. We went through one for Exchange Online. We're talking about one here for Teams. There's one that just is in beta right now for Azure troubleshooting and support of connectivity. So there are all, you can see that the trend here is in new exams and new certifications, these specialties around troubleshooting and support. And this is just another one of those, the MS 740 exam. You can see there's 6 weighted objective topics, and all are pretty well even, with the exception of the one being the highest weighted is Teams meetings and live events, which is really probably what 90% of the companies out there are really using Microsoft Teams for, is those meetings and live events. But there are a lot of other things that you need to take into account and may have to troubleshoot in terms of signing in issues, federation with other organizations, voice issues you can see, which goes along with that voice engineer that we talked about in the previous slide, and how the Teams channels and how we troubleshoot people not being able to access and things like that all go into this troubleshooting Microsoft Teams specialty. So let's talk about the Microsoft 365 developer and SCI certification updates. The developer is really just one exam, and then we'll talk about a couple things around the security certification path as well. So the developer associate, this has been out for a while. It's gone through some changes. There were some updates in November 2021 for the MS 600 exam. This is really a level of understanding around developing in Microsoft 365, and this goes along with Teams and SharePoint and Office and Exchange, and how we can build in and build apps within those services. One of those examples I mentioned, the one venue service that Opsgility has for delivering virtual events. That is an app that was built on Microsoft Teams, utilizing the API with Microsoft Graph. So having this developer associate, if you are building apps and want to integrate into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem using Microsoft Graph, this really becomes an important area of knowledge for you to learn. So, we have a developer track in Azure and a developer track in Power Platform. We need a developer track in Microsoft 365 as well, because Microsoft 365 does have APIs and some open source, a lot of open source capabilities for us to leverage within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And this exam covers that information and covers those areas. So if you get into development, if you're developing apps, this is definitely the certification for you. And that's it for that's really the only developer app, with Microsoft 365 being a SaaS-based solution, having developer APIs and how you utilize those is really the breadth of what you have. How you want to get, you've built an app, you want to get it into Microsoft 365. This is what you want to do. Let's go into now the security area. And if you go back and review my Azure certification updates webinar that I did a few weeks ago, I have a little bit more depth around the security, compliance, and identity certifications wrapped in that one. I'm going to talk about just 2 within this particular webinar. You can go back and listen to the other webinar. It is available on the Skill Me Up YouTube channel, I believe, or the Skill Me Up website, where you can access that webinar for the Azure updates, and I go through all of the security updates within that one. But within Microsoft 365, there is the MS 500 exam, which is going through an update in May of 2022. They're removing a couple of things around communication compliance policies. There's been a lot of naming within the security and compliance portals, so those are going through some changes, especially with Microsoft Sentinel and Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, and their references in there. I don't believe there's anything going into it, or maybe they are scrambling to make the changes that they made back in mid-April around Microsoft Purview, but keep in mind there are 4 topics here. This is a very broad security exam around Microsoft 365. It's everything that is security, compliance, and identity within Microsoft 365. Very similar to the AZ 500 security engineer within Azure. It takes everything into account. And then one of the things that I state around that is once you've gone through and passed like the security, compliance, and identity fundamentals, the SC 900, to get everything that's Microsoft 365 and Azure in a level of understanding, you can then dig deeper into the MS 500 if you're interested in and working in Microsoft 365 rather than Azure, to get the full depth and breadth of Microsoft 365 security, compliance, and identity. And there are 4 objective areas for this. We have, again, identity and access is a key one, very important with a SaaS-based application like Microsoft 365, a SaaS-based solution. You have no jurisdiction or responsibility towards the physical layers, and really the compute and storage layers and all of those are really Microsoft that is going to handle the responsibility of putting security controls in place. So protecting our identity and protecting our data and the compliance and security of our data is really what Microsoft 365 is going to be your responsibility. Having the proper controls in place, having the proper classification levels to acknowledge and find vulnerabilities and threats within your organization. That is all really what this exam entails, and you can see that from all of the percentage levels. Information protection is a little bit lower percentage here, and that's mainly because there's an SC 400 information protection administrator exam that goes a lot deeper in that. And then there's but fairly evenly weighted across all of those. Again, but identity and access is hugely important when we're in cloud services, and even more important with Microsoft 365, because it's really that and your data is really the only thing that you have responsibility to put security control over. Microsoft takes care of all of the underlying technology and services, or technology and hardware and networking and all of that on the back end. So we need to take into account how we're protecting our identities and protecting who has access to what and who has access to what data. And the MS 500 exam is one of the options, one of the prerequisite options to the Cyber Solutions Architect Expert exam. The SC 100 exam, that's currently in beta in spring of 2022. You have 4 options here. Like I said, if you can see option 4 down here, these are in no particular order. But option 4 is the Microsoft 365 Security Administrator Associate exam, which was what we talked about in the previous slide. We also have the SC 200, which is the Security Operations Analyst, which is focused a lot on Microsoft 365 Defender, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and very heavily, about 50%, focused on Microsoft Sentinel. We have the Identity and Access Administrator Associate, the SC 300 exam, which is near and dear to my heart. I wrote a prep guide on this particular exam on the SC 300. So that's one that you can take. and the Azure Security Engineer Associate, the AZ500. Now, if you're a Microsoft 365 person, that's probably not necessarily the one for you, but any one of the other three as a Microsoft 365 administrator or architect would be great to take and to move forward then into the Microsoft Cybersecurity Architect exam and get an expert badge in Microsoft Security Compliance and Identity. So keep that in mind as you're kind of going through your Microsoft 365 planning and path of what those are going to look like. And I'll talk a little bit now I'll mention the capabilities and what you need to know for the Microsoft Cybersecurity Architect, just to kind of bring together that expert piece here. You're taking the MS500. Where do I go next? The cybersecurity exam is a good way to go. And this is, again, designing and evaluating. It's very similar at an architecture view to what Microsoft has done with the AZ 305 for Azure designing and architecting, understanding zero trust strategy and architecture. And this is really focused a lot on the Microsoft risk and compliance architecture, the MCRA framework. So if you want to go learn more and understand a little bit more about what you need to know, go look up the MCRA on your favorite browser, the Microsoft MCRA, and you'll get an idea around the depth of what this exam really is focusing on, and how it's really helping to secure your infrastructure, your data, your applications, and how we're designing and architecting and planning up front. So it makes it a very good exam because it thinks about all of the Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365 solutions and how we are going to design and evaluate potential threats and vulnerabilities across our cloud infrastructure. Next, we're going to talk about modern desktop certifications. There's no new certifications here, but there's some updates to discuss within this certification area. So, modern desktop, we have our Windows client, we have our MD100 exam. So if you are focused on Windows devices, this is an exam for you and a path for you. This is being updated currently in May 2022, and we with now no longer just this used to be the Windows 10 exam. Obviously, we have Windows 11 out, so we're adding those options in there. We're putting Hyper-V in there because you can get with Pro and Enterprise versions of Windows 10 and Windows 11. You can run Hyper-V in those environments and run Linux devices if you want and things like that. So really heavy around installation and configuration on this exam rather than necessarily deploying devices. You can see there's a little less focus on that, but it's really managing devices and data and maintaining Windows that are really the key pieces, and then storage and connectivity and deployment are a little bit lower. So we can see how those are. And each of these slides has the link to get to these in Microsoft Learn, but it's very easy. Just go to Microsoft Learn, go to Browse Certifications, and you can look up these exam numbers that way. The second piece of the managing modern desktops is the MD101. Again, going through an update, adding Windows 11 to it, removing some things around networking, adding identity management and conditional access to this, and putting some things around monitoring and notification, as well as this is probably one of the key exams around Intune. And doing and managing and maintaining devices with Intune is really big in the MD101 exam. It also has some areas within the MS 100 and 101 exams as well, which we'll talk about here in a moment as well. So keep that in mind. And what these two exams make up is then you don't get a badge when you take the MD100 or the MD101 on its own, but you take and pass both of those exams, and you are awarded the Microsoft 365 certified Microsoft Modern Desktop Administrator Associate badge. So that is your modern desktop. If you are focused on the end devices, this is the path that you want to take. Lastly, that we'll cover here is the Microsoft 365 Administrator Expert Certification. And you might have noticed that I've talked about 3 different expert level certifications within Microsoft 365. And I think that actually, the security, compliance, and identity really goes across Azure as well as Microsoft 365. You've got the Teams voice expert path, as well as the administrator expert path and the SCI expert. On the Azure side, you've got your solution architect expert, you've got your developer, your DevOps expert, and you got the SCI expert as well. So both of them, they're pretty well balanced, whether you're going the Azure path or the Microsoft 365 path, having some expert badge capabilities as well. But this is the kind of the key and the really the king path around Microsoft 365 Administrator, where we are really taking into account everything, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. So this exam is made up of a prerequisite exam and then 2 additional exams, and we'll talk about that in one of the last slides here. But one of those exams is that's specific to this path is the MS-100, which is the Identity and Services. Again, very similar, some overlap topics to the SC-300 exam with identities and roles, but we need to also understand designing and implementing Microsoft 365 services and planning for Office 365 workloads. So those are very key things. Access and authentication is a little bit lower on here because, again, there's the SC-300 exam if you're going to get into being specifically an identity and access administrator. The MS-101 exam, they've done some updates in here for Defender and Cloud apps, very big on security and threat management, implementing modern device services, and managing governance and compliance. And you can see modern devices are very strong in this one, as well as and within those implementing modern device services, Intune again comes into light in terms of this topic area as well. And you see really 3 areas that are very heavily focused on and really deeply tested upon in this MS-100 exam. So you want to get that Enterprise Administrator Expert badge. Again, we have the MS-100, the MS-101 exams, but we also have prerequisites. So similarly to the SC-100, there's a list of prerequisite exams. On this, again, you have have exams that we talked about within this webinar, as well as we have the SC-300 in here as well. But we got the modern desktop. So if you've taken the passed MD-100 and MD-101, you have to pass 2 more exams. So this one's probably the least comfortable path to take because you got to pass 4 exams to get the expert badge. The other ones, getting that MS-500. The security administrator, the messaging administrator, which is at 203, the Teams administrator, which is the 700, or the SC-300. That any one of those exams or the 2 MD exams plus the 100 and the 101 gets you that expert badge. So difficult path to go through to get this expert badge. Probably the toughest within the entire Microsoft ecosystem from my standpoint, in my opinion, just because it's the only one you have to take 3 exams for, and maybe 4 if you're a modern desktop person. But again, lots of pride and accomplishment though if you go down this path and you get that expert exam. So what are your next steps and what is the direction to take going forward? You've now know about pretty much the entire breadth of Microsoft 365 exams. There might be a couple that we didn't cover here today just because there weren't any major updates to necessarily discuss. Again, look at the poster and understand that. I think we did cover, though, pretty much all of the MS exams. Like I said, I didn't go deeply through the SCI exams. You can go and review the Azure certification updates webinar, and I went through those a little bit further. So what do we, doing your certification journey, what are the recommendations. First and foremost, go into Microsoft Learn, look up the exam pages. As I said, there the link is on each of the slides, but go to your browser, go to Microsoft Learn, go to Browse Certifications. You can type in and search based on the exam letter or the exam name. Get the objective areas. Usually within those exam pages is Microsoft Learn content that you can go through on your own time, on-demand content, self-paced that you can learn. With any associate or expert level exam, I always say it's very helpful to go through some level of instructor-led training, whether that's a class offered by Opsgility or whether it's on-demand content that you have access to through an on-demand learning partner. That's fine as well. But doing labs and having hands-on practice are of the utmost importance. And there are exercises within Microsoft Learn that you can go through. And with Microsoft 365, you can generally get a 30-day trial subscription to most of their solutions, and it'll give you time to go through and learn those areas. But you definitely need to get into the portals and understand those portals. If you're going through like the MS 500 or any of the security, compliance, and identity areas, keep in mind that you're probably going to need an Azure subscription as well. And an Azure subscription, you can get a free 30-day 100 credit subscription, which is plenty for what you need to do for Microsoft Sentinel and things that tie into your Microsoft 365 tenant. So again, but I can't stress enough, when you're doing an associate or an expert level exam journey, you definitely want to do hands-on fundamentals. I say you can usually get away with going through the Learn content and looking at Microsoft Docs because it's very high level. It's not, once you're starting to get into those areas and get into the design, plan, implement, deploy topic areas, you really should do that before you take the exam, or you might get blindsided by questions that are asking you steps to do things and stuff like that. So that ends our webinar. I want to thank you for attending, and we went through all of the how to find the latest certifications. We went through updates and what's new with Microsoft 365 certifications, and then how to go through and start your journey to certifications. We have some other upcoming webinars with Opsgility. There's a Power Platform certification updates webinar on May 17th, a Dynamics 365 certification updates on May 31st, 2022. So feel free to tune in and look out for those on social media to find out how to register for those. Follow Skill Me Up as well as Opsgility on the social media platforms, and you'll get notification when the registration's up for those. Also, if you're interested in any of the capabilities that Opsgility offers, the instructor-led trainings, the consulting services, as well as if you have a virtual event coming up and want to look into the One Venue platform, reach out to Opsgility at sales@opsgility.com or the phone number provided on this slide, and they'll be happy to help you. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. My name is Dwayne Natwick, and this was a webinar for Opsgility and the Skill Me Up Academy. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a great day.